All right, welcome once again to Worthy of the Jersey. Today is May 12th, 2020. I am Eric Flannery, along with Tim Smith. And once again, we are joined by Sharman White from Pace Academy, Mike Jones from DeMatha, the U16, U17, USA basketball staff. And I screwed up right from the beginning here because I was going to bring my past USA gold medal rings and ask Mike Jones, when, Mike, are we getting our USA rings for the U16?
You mean this thing right here?
Yeah. Mine's aren't as nice as that. I mean, we're waiting. Me and Sharm are sitting here waiting for when our rings are going to come. Because when Showalter was in charge, they just kind of showed up at our door.
Yeah, but you know, Showalter started this tradition where he delivered them in person.
He did? Oh, you got okay. All right.
I'm just saying, hey, that's the rumor. That's the rumor.
All right. Well, in today's episode, so in other words, we're not getting them. So today's episode, first of all, we're glad we're smiling because I know I'm 9 weeks into my quarantine, but I'm breaking quarantine as much as possible recently. Jump over to Sharm, like Georgia. Let's just kind of I'm always just curious to see. I know you're locked in your office, but is it getting any better? Are people kind of getting out more? Are they a little bit more comfortable?
Yeah, people are out here, man. I mean, it's not like 100%, but it's a lot more people out. We my daughter's teacher had his birthday was yesterday, and so they did like a little drive-by. We had 2 of those actually last week, drive-by birthday deals. And you can see the streets are more crowded, and we're known for our traffic, and our traffic is kind of like back to where it was. You know, just far as, just you getting, a lot of cars out there. And so it's starting to let loose, man. But I'm stay on the side of caution with it.
Yeah. So are they, so you haven't been out, right? Really?
I mean, we go out as needed, not anything just to go hang out. Like we went by my mom's house and we kind of stood outside and, she talked to us. She didn't like it, but we were just kind of being precautious for her, what I mean? Because you don't want to put her in a bad spot. And so, it's just, with everything going on, and the weather's been awesome. And it's with the weather being so good and not being able to really get out and enjoy it the way you normally would, it's been tough. It's been tough.
We're jealous with that because today's the nicest day it's been in 10 days, and it's just got to, I think, what, Tim, 50 degrees today?
Wow. Yeah, man, the sun's out and we're breaking 50, so it's like the shorts are out and we can go get a suntan. And
wow.
Coach Jones, how are things in D.C., baby?
It is what it is. So, kind of similar to Sean. Obviously, everybody, happy belated Mother's Day to all the moms out there. My mom, I called her, was like, hey, I'm going to be stopping by, wish you happy Mother's Day. And she was like, well, I'm still self-isolating. And so she was like, are you going to wave from the car? And I was just like, geez, Mom, I just, maybe get a hug or something.
Man.
She was like, no, we'll be all right.
Man.
As long as you. So.
You guys are soft because we went to my mom's house. My kids went over there. We had a couple brothers and sisters over there. We probably had 15 or 20 in the house. We were all living it up like it was normal inside. Now again,
yeah.
we all self-quarantined kind of ourselves and then just kind of got together.
Yeah, so. No, not Janet Jones.
No.
Not Janet Jones. She made it very clear. I actually was able to go in the house, but no hugging. I dropped off a couple of things, happy Mother's Day stuff, but nah.
That's good. Well, at least you guys are staying safe. So I'm still going to call you soft. I don't care. So with that being said, we do want to talk about, and we'll talk about it at the end, but in case people don't listen the whole time, Basketball County's coming out this Friday night with starring Mike Jones and DeMatha.
Not starring Mike Jones.
Hey, we're going to say that. So if you want to live tweet at 9 p.m. this Friday night on Showtime, you got to check out Basketball County. Mike, anything else to prep this? I know we prepped it a little bit last time. But
no, just, it'd be great if everybody could tune in. I know, some very monumental figures in the basketball world, but definitely in our Prince George's County here. Kevin Durant is an executive producer. Victor Oladipo, Quinn Cook, all helped to produce this. Kevin Durant's filming company, production company, 35 Ventures, is responsible for putting it together. Jimmy Jenkins, John Beckham, the masterminds behind it. And I just can't wait to see it. It definitely celebrates the rich basketball tradition we have here in our area, but most specifically Prince George's County. I can't wait to see it.
Well, I know Sharman, I can't wait to see it either. And I'm sure a lot of people out there, it's the next documentary after The Last Dance that we're looking forward to. So it's going to be exciting. But good luck with that. I want to see the tweets of your pictures in your tuxedo and the red carpet at your house.
Yes, sir. Yeah. From the front door to the kitchen. That's
Exactly.
that's about as good as I can.
Holding the crab. Holding the crab.
Oh, yeah. All right, so let's get into this. This podcast, we want to focus a little bit about practice. And we've had a lot of people, I know through the years, and I'm sure you guys get it as much, if not more than I do, just about how we structure practice. I think everybody would love to know what goes on in a DeMatha practice or a Pace Academy practice, how you guys structure that, how we run it, if there's anything unique about it. So we want to be a little bit structured with this, I think, and kind of stay within some categories and then maybe break out into some other conversation if we need to. But let's just start with this. And we'll start with Sharm on this one. Just with structure of practice, your season's going on, or you sit down every day to plan your practice. What goes into the actual structure? How does a Pace Academy practice look like?
Well, yeah, definitely a lot of planning goes into it, whether it's from, watching practice film from the day before, seeing some of the things that we didn't do well. What do we need to work on? Are we preparing for a team, scout items? But when you come to one of our practices, you'll see we try to move it from thing to thing. We don't try to get hung up too much. We try to make sure that we're emphasizing the things that need to be emphasized. But we have a structure. We generally start off with, just movement, and then we doing our stretching, and then we get into a lot of our defensive stuff. We spend probably the first 30 to 45 minutes just with defensive stuff. But, with that being said, it's defensive stuff, but we also have got some coaches, assistant coaches, to coach offense within those things that we do, because we don't want to lose sight of that. But by doing that, it makes our defense better by going against guys that are getting coached from an offensive perspective while they're doing their drills. And, then we get it moving, up and down with a little transition things. And we kind of round it out with, we incorporate a lot of shooting within. One of the things we do in our practices, we do a lot of shooting. And I use shooting as like water breaks, basically. Like, when we breaking in between a drill or in between segments, we put shooting in between that. And that's kind of like a water break, so to speak. Not literally, but just, kind of like a break into action before we get back into it, because we try to create such a competitive environment, and so when you get that competitive, sometimes you got to bag off a little bit and just, let them do something like that that's going to be helping their game as well. And then, you get back to it. But we always end it with some type of half court, like 3 stops or stop, score, stop, or, score, stop, score. We end it that way. And, we always wrap it up with a communication circle. But we just, again, we try to make sure that we're going from segment to segment, making sure that we're crisp. And, I have the practices timed out, and the managers will have the clock running with times on it. Sometimes I might go over, and I'll come in there some days and just say, hey, I need to be on schedule today. If I'm over scheduled, just tap the horn, let me know if I'm, going over a little bit. But, and when we need to take time out for things, just kind of, sometimes you just go off the schedule, you just go off of it and just say, look, we need to spend time on this, and just, kind of break out of the norm of what you normally do. So that's pretty much what it involves, and just in a snapshot.
Mike, how about you?
Very similar. Obviously, we all have our own nuances to our practices, but, I think fundamentally we are all very much alike. I think one of the things I want to do is, first of all, be prepared. Have a detailed, written out practice plan before every practice, so that I've put, our coaching staff's thoughts in writing. This is what we want to accomplish, and this is the format or the lineage of how we're going to get it done. I want every drill that we do to have 2 or 3 components to it. two of three or three of three components to it, that being a fundamental aspect to it, a conditioning aspect to it, and a competitive aspect. So if every drill we do, if it has two of those three, I think it's something that will benefit us in the long run. And then just depending upon where we are in our season, I think it's very important that our kids know why we're doing the things we're doing, if we're preparing for a specific opponent, or if we're just doing something that is core to who we are as a basketball program. You know, we practice probably closer to 2 hours when the season begins. We get down to, I think we got it down to pretty much 70 minutes at the end of this past season. You know, we had a crazy stretch at the end of our season where we played, I believe, 8 games in 13 days. So we were playing more than just every other day. So practice time got limited because of that, because I wanted to keep our kids as fresh as possible. But I just think that the structure of it, being prepared, is the most important thing, and having direct goals that you understand, but then also your staff understands. And then for what it's worth, just having your kids being understanding to it. So we could talk more about that, but that's where we start.
With that, do you guys spend time with your coaching staff pre-practice, post-practice, and how much time or how much input? And I know what you're going to say, but how much input do you really give those coaches in actually planning your practice? Or do you plan your practice and then say, like, this is what we're going to do today, and then kind of go from there? Mike, what do you do with that?
So, I mean, I'll give a quick Coach Wooten story. So when Coach Wooten was the coach at DeMatha, myself, Neil Murphy, basically all of Coach Wooten's assistants worked in the building. So Coach, it was really easy for him, either at the end of practice or before practice, he would meet with us as a staff, and he would write up the practice plan with our input, like in his office. Either we would do tomorrow's practice plan right after today's practice, or we would do today's practice right before practice began. Unfortunately, my staff is not comprised like that. Most of my coaches work outside the building. So being able to get them all at the same time really can only happen at the end of the current day's practice, and we can plan for the next day. So what we've done, and technology is different, like we're able to now, like we have a group text, and I take input from my coaches pretty much all day long as I'm making that day's practice plan. So that's kind of how we've had to do it. I don't have the luxury of having all my guys in the building.
Sharm, how about you?
Yeah, man, we, as much as possible, we try to meet before practice. And that could mean, like, if I say meet before practice, that could be the day before, like post-practice, basically, and saying what's going into the next day's practice. I think their input is very, very valuable because, I mean, they see stuff that you might have not seen or didn't see during the prior practice or what have you. They might, because when we do scouting, we divvy up the scouting reports. Everybody takes a bunch of them. So if it's their scout, they kind of have the lead, and kind of like, I'll make out the practice plan and I'll kind of put in what it is that we're going to be doing, but I kind of give them the autonomy to be able to say, Coach, we need to really spend some time on our zone offense because we're going to get zoned a lot this week. So, with that being said, trying to spend as much time, and like Mike, like you said, I have one coach in the building. I have two outside of the building. So, like, with that, it's more of a text thread. What do you guys think about me putting this guy at this position? And, they responding and, giving, different inputs. And then we kind of like come to a conclusion. But that's kind of like the way we live now through texting. So we kind of group text it out and try to figure it out. But we do spend an enormous amount of time. And then after practice, we'll say what didn't work, what we need to spend more time on, what did work. Maybe we need to come back to that, what guys look well, just the things that you do to analyze practice and kind of like get an idea of what needs to happen going forward. And so, and I always ask them, give us a grade. What was the grade of practice? Is it A, B, C, D, and we kind of like go from there with it, what made it an A, what made it a B, and try to use those things to keep moving forward.
I think you both make great points, and I think that one of the great things I enjoy about listening to other coaches more so even just picking up drills and getting some ideas about it, but it also confirms a lot of what we already do as coaches. And I think a lot of coaching is that you just need to hear somebody else, especially people that have been successful, like, hey, they do the same thing that we do. And just to reiterate what you guys are talking about is, you know, getting your assistant's input's really important, but there are different ways to do it. You don't have to actually sit down for 15 minutes prior to practice because times have changed. We have the technology to be able to do it. So similar to you guys, there's a text chain amongst my coaches. During the day, they might not, I'll get pissed at times if I already started planning practice and then they text me something like an hour before practice, like, hey, we need to work on this. And I'd be like, damn, you know, I just got done putting this together. But we typically, you know, right after practice, I'll grab our guys and be like, all right, you know, to Sharm's point, we don't actually put a grade on it, but I think that's a great idea. You know, what did we do well today? What do we need to work on? And what do we need to work on tomorrow? They give me those ideas, and similar to what Mike says during the day, you know, the next day they might contact me and say, you know, I just thought about this, you know, we need to add, you know, another 10 minutes of shooting today, or we might need to, you know, work on zone offense, like Sharm said. So all really good stuff. And I think if there's coaches watching, you might do some of this already, or, you know, picking up something like what Sharm said about grading your practices every day is, to me is pretty interesting. Tim, do you have, I mean, I got a ton of questions here, but Tim, if you guys.
I was curious, like, can you guys give examples of what goals look like? And if it's something that you either write on a practice plan, or if it's something you have in mind as far as just what goal setting for a specific practice, how you guys use that?
Hey, I'll start. I didn't even think of that question. I don't know if you can see this. I don't have the tech that you guys have, but like,
hold it up a little higher and closer.
Can you see that? Okay, here's a little bit of our practice.
There you go.
Okay, so
we'll make you take a picture of it.
This would be a traditional practice, and it's probably backwards on your screen, but so we would break it down.
Man, you should hold up.
Yeah.
You got to email that to Tim so he can share the screen. Or something. Like, come on, brother.
Here's another practice with all my.
I say you're lucky it's not handwritten.
This is what the practice looks like once we get to practice versus what I started off with just typing and printing. But I just wanted to point out, like, up in the corner every day we have, and I've shared this before, and I know Mike does this, and Sharm, we stole from Don Showalter is the mind candy, what we use in practice. And I flat out stole that from Coach Showalter through our days with USA Basketball. And to speak to kind of Tim's point, I don't know if you classify these as goals, but to me they are. And I think just to explain what mind candy is and how we use it, literally I would say 90% of the time we meet as a team before practice in my office. And my office is just big enough to fit our team. And we have a TV screen up there that we can show film on, but it also is connected to my computer that I can write stuff on. So typically every day I'll write a quote or something that's important for practice up on the board. Our players all have notebooks, so I hand them out a notebook before the season. And every day they write down whatever it is that I put up on the board or what we want to talk about. And usually it's a quote, you know, whatever that quote may be. I know, you know, Sharm is awesome at sharing a bunch of quotes on Twitter. I've been trying to do it lately just because I'm bored. But it's a quote that we put up there that's important. It might be something relative to basketball. It might be something relative to personality, communication. I think toughness is a big one. A lot of quotes that have to deal with teamwork and communication. Kids write them down, and then we talk about that quote for the day. And it's usually specific, or tries to be specific towards, you know, what we're trying to accomplish as a team. And I just kind of relate that to goals for us. And a lot of the quotes are off the court stuff. So we're trying to build our players, not just as good basketball players, but like everybody else, good human beings. So it gets them to talk about life situations. Maybe there's some tension in society that's going on, whether, no matter what it may be. And we might put a quote on the board that has to relate with what's going on. And the kids will read it, and then we'll talk about it. And I think that builds communication. It allows and teaches your players to talk, because I'll ask them to share. Sometimes they volunteer. It builds up a lot of relationships where kids kind of learn something about their teammate that maybe they didn't know. I know Sharm talked about the communication circle at the end of his practice, which I'm sure he can get into as well. But as far as specific goals, that's kind of how they look on a daily basis at St. Ed's. Like those to me, the mind candies are kind of what we share and what I would kind of classify as our goals each day, both on and off the court. And I don't know, Mike, you want to jump in on that one?
Again, I think the mind candy, you know, Coach Wooden used to call it the thought of the day. I think that's something that's tremendous. You start a practice like that. Coach Sharm talking about ending practice with the communication circle. You know, the two bookends, you know, the two pillars of a great practice. It starts with that and ends with that. And those are two things that teams can really, really, really kind of get into. And, you know, for me, it's fun. You know, you get the kids, they got to remember it. And then, you know, for the obscure mind candy or the thoughts, to have them explain it. Like it gets them talking. It gets them to have to help each other out when it's, you know, difficult. You know, I always use a thought by Aristophanes.
Wow.
This is one of Coach Wooden's favorites. Let each of us practice the art in which he knows. I always use that during tryouts. And then I use that at any point in time in the season where I feel like guys on the team are trying to do something that we don't need them to do, or maybe it's outside of their role. You know, it's kind of morphed into the whole LeBron be a star in your role. But those two things mean the same thing. But to get your kids to, first of all, who the heck is Aristophanes, you know, and then just to get them to explain what that means to them, because ultimately what they know is more important than what you know.
True.
Sharm, you got anything on that?
Yeah. What we do generally, Eric, can I share a screen with you?
Please. You mean not like this?
No. I'm doing it so, hey, this is what Mike was talking about.
Come on now.
No, this is like a copy of our practice plan, but you see our goals are generally like we call them focus areas. And like here you'll see we talk about communication. These are things that we, you know, every coach we know that we're looking for throughout practice. And, you know, like I say, they're like goals, but communication, competing, transition, decision making, those were the ones for that particular practice. You can see we got a winning thought. And I try to find a thought or a mind candy that's where we are, like you were saying earlier. Try to find something that's relevant to where we are, not just a random type deal where, you know, we just saying a quote to be saying a quote. I try to find things that fit where we are, whether it's about toughness, like you said, you know, whether it's about just having that mental edge and, you know, things of that nature. And then, like I said, you always do a communication circle, and like at the bottom, I'll put down what it is. And then I tell them, like, you know, I try to come up with different things that jar their thinking process and what they like to do going into it. And the other thing that I think helps with practice planning and while we're on it is I try to have my groups already set up, like 4-man groups, 5-man groups, things of that nature, shooting groups, so that we won't be straddling around trying to figure out who's going where, who's going to do what. I try to have all those things lined up so it makes practice flow a little bit better. But that's, you know, again, to that point, it's the same kind of deal what you guys are already doing.
Sharm, you bring up a great point there too, which I think there are coaches out there that don't understand this sometimes about the importance, and Mike had mentioned the importance of preparation and how much time you put into your practice. But something as simple as, and we all do this, putting your team together before practice, your little drill groups, your, you know, coaches in charge of this, coaches in charge of that, you know, just having those names ready, and we do it all the time, and boom, we want to keep, you know, I guess that goes into the next question for your practice is the flow. Like, how important is the flow of your practice, and what do you do when the flow isn't there? And what I mean by that is, we just mentioned how we keep the flow going. Like, we have the teams already made, and it might be 20 seconds, but during that 20 seconds, Sharm, you talked about maybe breaks in between drills. You have those guys doing shooting groups or shooting, you know, drills while they're getting drinks. You know, we do the same thing. That's kind of our rest time, is getting some personal development in those times. But how do you keep that flow going? And with that, I want to use the quote that Showalter used before, and that we've heard all the time, is that coaches or players don't have bad practices, but coaches do. To me, that's kind of part of in my mind, how I keep the flow going and kind of get a feel for the practice. So Are there any comments on that, on how you really focus on keeping the flow of the practice going? And if it does kind of change in a negative way, how do you go about changing that?
Well, I know I put the responsibility on the other coaches on my staff to, you know, because I can get bogged down. I could be like, no, we're going to get this play right. And, you know, we're drilling it and drilling it and drilling it, and it's just not working. To have one of them kind of come over to me and be like, hey, coach, you know, let's move on to the next drill. You know, hey, you've had the managers reset the clock 4 times already because the time's run out. Like, you know, hey, we got to, you know, we're not getting it. We got to come back to it. So I kind of put that on them. But I think we all have those times where we, you know, you look to your captains too. And this is one of the things that I've really become big on, is empowering the kids. We had a kid, Donovan Miller, this year, who's a senior, who had a good career with us. You know, 2-year varsity player, was a freshman player, JV player. He became very much our emotional leader. And whenever practice just didn't have the right energy, I would have him get the guys together instead of me yelling at them and, you know, trying to, you know, hey, let's get on the line and run. I would have him kind of get the guys together, and who knows what he told them. You know, he can be like, hey, man, screw coach today. Like, we got to do something. Like, it didn't matter. He was our leader. He got our guys together, and he got us going in the right direction. And, you know, it's not a button you want to push too many times, but, you know, occasionally when I had to go there with them, you know, I had a guy on the team that was ready to take the responsibility of getting us right. And that was a very much valued thing on our team. So,
Sharm?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very similar to Mike. I mean, like, I'll meet, like, if I feel practice is getting off flow, you know, I'll charge the captains or charge the players with, you know, y'all get together, y'all huddle up, y'all talk about what it is you got to do to finish this practice all right, or get us back on track. But I also meet with the coaches at the time and say, hey, I need a little bit more enthusiasm, I need a little bit more policing, I need a little bit more of this, I need a little bit more of that, just to kind of give them idea of what has to happen for this practice to get back on flow. Because sometimes as coaches now, and we all can relate to this, sometimes we have these wonderful practices planned and we have all this thing laid out and things just don't go the way they're planned. I think all coaches need to know that happens to every one of us as a coach. And sometimes we overplan, and sometimes, you know, but, you know, how you respond to it and how you're able to navigate through that is really growth that helps you grow as a coach. And so again, you know, having your players, you know, have the ability to police themselves in a situation like that, but also with your coaches and making sure that they know that what has to happen in order for practice to get back on flow, because each practice, no matter what practice of the year it is the most important practice.
It's 2 great points. I mean, obviously designating people to keep you on track. Sharman, I know firsthand how Mike might obsess over a certain play or a certain player at times. So it's good to know that he listens to his assistants at DeMatha. And now maybe he'll listen to you and I, Sharm, the next time he sits there and he runs that same play 47 times. And we're looking at our watches like what?
Hey. No, you can't say that. I stayed on time. Unlike others that we all know, I stayed on time. So don't do that to me.
No, you did. You know I'm just busting your chops. I love you. That's why I can do it.
Hey, I definitely will run something 47 times now. I'm not disputing that part. But, hey, if we had a 90-minute practice, we stayed within that 90 minutes.
No, you did. You're 100% right about that. I think that's one of the only other reasons that they keep me around at USA is because Sharm thinks I'm goofy enough and strange enough that I usually just go up to Showalter or you and be like, dude, let's go. Let's get the hell out of here. Where everybody else is looking at each other like, oh man, this is going on. I'm like, all right, shut it down. Let's go. So
Says somewhere in the background laughing my butt off. This dude's crazy.
Yeah. Hey, Eric Flannery and Herman Hareed.
Yeah,
they will definitely let you know when it's time to go.
Yeah, there's a legend right there. Just put me in the same sentence with Herm is pretty special. But the other thing, Sharm, you mentioned there is that we all have bad practices happen, and your plan. We all plan our practice, and we put a lot of time into it in preparation. But you have to be flexible, and I think that's what good coaches can do at times. If something were to disrupt your practice, what can you do? And I'll just give a quick example of something to the extreme. But a few years ago, we were in the playoffs, and it was literally the day before a playoff game. And we got out of school, I think, at like 2 o'clock, and we actually lost electricity in our building. And we were sitting in my office, and it went black and it went dark, and we just lost electricity. And the administration came down, and they're basically like, you can wait it out. We don't know how long it's going to be, or, you can call it. And I just looked at my coaches and the kids, and I'm like, listen, guys, we're ready, right? There's probably a few things we wanted to shore up today, but we can get those things done and shoot around before practice tomorrow. Take the day off, save your legs, study whatever it is, playbook. I'll send a text later about what we need to go over. And we left, we didn't wait, and electricity came on about a half hour later, but I think the kids just appreciated that too at that point. We came back and played our best game of the year the next day. But doing little things like that, I think, for practice, sometimes being a nice guy, sometimes giving them, I don't know if you guys have ever done this, but kids walk into practice, and I've done this late in the season, and they think they're coming in and you kind of know that they're tired or whatever. And I might run them through the first drill and then just say, that was awesome. That was a great drill. You guys worked your go home, like get out of here. And I've found I'll do that once or twice a year, and the kids just respond big time. And some of it's because I don't feel like I'm going to have a good practice. Like, I'm like, oh, man, I'm tired. I'm not going to waste an hour and a half or 2 hours today just to, for whatever reason, just to get these guys out of here. So I've done that a few times. I don't know if you guys have ever done anything similar to that, or do anything for your guys special in practice situations like that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I've done that, something very similar to that. And you're right, the reaction you get, because like you say, if you're tired or if you're worn down a little bit, you can only imagine where they are as players. So, try not to make it predictable, every once in a while, players, they'll nudge you and say, hey, well, how long are we going today? When they ask you how long you're going today, that's how you kind of get an indication that, hey, it might be time for a little break or a little break of the monotony a little bit, and just try to give them something to get them back fired up, recharged. And so, usually when you give them that little day or a day like that, and I've done this where in the playoffs, we got ready for the playoffs. We got ready for our first playoff game. And, I told them, the day of the game, I said, hey, meet downstairs at 3 o'clock, be ready. We're going to walk through, da-da-da-da. And I had 2 chair masseuses down there, and I just had them all go in and get chair massages, just before the game. And they were like ecstatic about it, because they thought we were finna go through the walkthrough and do all this stuff. And the chair massage was something different. It was refreshing. And, they came out of there refreshed, and it made a big difference in how they played that night. And so, again, just going off that, going off the road of the path, going off the path a little bit to just try to, see about your players, you know what I mean? Because, as hard as if you love them hard, you can coach them hard. And we do a lot of coaching, we do a lot of coaching hard, but we love them hard first. And I think once they see that, those things like that make them able to respond a lot, in a positive way.
That's great.
I like that. I like that phrase too, Sean. That's awesome. Now I can give you just 2 examples. So one is, just kind of similar to Sean, the hot yoga thing we talked about last week. Like, I had my guys all get on the bus thinking that we were all going to hot yoga. They had their tight past the hot yoga place to go to a bowling alley and just, had a team outing where we just bowled. And we did that right before the playoffs. It was really fun. This was a couple of seasons ago. And then my coaches and my players know, like, every now and then we'll walk into practice and be like, hey, we give you guys 1 shot from half court. If you make it, we're out of here. Like, no practice today, you get to go home. And I can remember one time I did that. Like, it's usually an argument about who's going to take the shot. But one time I did that, and everyone on the team pointed to the same guy. And I was just like, oh, no. And he drained it like it was a freaking layup. Like Ahmad Clark, he actually just finished playing at the University of Albany, one of their best players. Everybody looked at him. It was no argument. Like, everybody was like, Ahmad. And he goes and he shoots it, and it's nothing but net. and they all like run off the court, don't even give me a chance to give them announcements for the next day. They were in the locker room before I could even say, oh man. Just again, break up the monotony, have a little fun with them. And it's worked out for us.
I'm going to start using I don't know about the massage chairs. I hope none of my players are listening.
Maybe for the coaches.
Massage chairs are cheap. If you give them a real massage, you're in trouble.
All right, I got you. All right, let's get into more practice specific. I know Sharm's got some clips to share, but before we get into those, your actual practice, do you guys focus? Because my philosophy's changed a little bit on this during practice. Do you spend more time, you think, on drills or actually playing? So, you know, when you design your practice, and does that have to be from does it change as the year goes on? Or do you guys, you know, if you had, let's just say you're not 50 minutes be on drill work and 40 minutes on playing, or has that changed at all as you guys, you know, continue on? Mike, why don't you start with that one?
So I'll say this. So it definitely depends upon the time of year. There is definitely, in every practice I have, a skill development finishes around the rim. We're going to have a skill development portion to every practice. Depending upon the time of year, determines how long that period of time is. But it's never going to be less than, you know, a 20-minute segment. So no matter what, 20 minutes. Now, if we're only going for an hour, maybe it's a 15 minutes. But, you know, for the most part, we're going to have 20 minutes of our practice, every single practice we have dedicated to skill development. In the early part of the season, when guys are kind of finding their role, what your rotation is, you play a little bit more because you want to see different combinations, how guys play with one another. You know, who's going to compete every single day, no matter what. Like, so we might play a little bit more early on in the season, but as we get closer to the end, again, we want to slow things down, and it becomes so much. Like every play we run, the other team knows exactly what we're doing. So we try to do a lot of stuff that is just generating, you know, what are we doing tomorrow versus Gonzaga? What are we doing tomorrow versus St. John's? So that we know exactly what it is going to take for us to win.
Sharm?
Yeah, I mean, very similar. I know we keep saying that, but we just kind of we've been cut from the same cloth, so to speak, and it's kind of like we kind of do a lot of the same things. But like, you know, early in the season, yeah, there are more drills, but I don't like to call them drill work. I like to call it real work, because we try to center everything around what's going to happen in a game. And I think we got this on a call a couple weeks ago from Jeff Van Gundy, work on the things that's going to happen the most. And I think, you know, even before I heard that, I think that was the mindset, you know, that I had going into practices. But, you know, again, early season, but we try to make everything realistic too, and we make things competitive. We do everything's competitive, basically. You know, it's winner or loser. And one of the things we do that we started when I was at Miller Grove was, you know, normally when you do a competitive drill and run, well, we tried something where we flipped it around, and we said winners run. And so when we told, you know, most guys are, why do winners have to run? You know, well, you get a chance to run this sprint, you're going to get better because of that sprint, you know, running that extra suicide. And if you did, you know, and so they bought it, and it worked. And because, you know, after a while, guys were saying, you know, hey, you know, the guys that were losing were upset because they were losing because they didn't get a chance to run, which is kind of like unheard of. And so we start with losers run at the beginning of the season, and we kind of work our way about a month into the season. We start winners run, and we kind of just flip it either way, just depending on if I'm mad with a particular team. Like, no, we're going to do losers run today because y'all, you know, I didn't want you guys to win. I wanted you guys to not win. So, but those types of things, you know, like I say, it's just, you know, breaking it up and doing it so that it doesn't become just a, you know, a mind-nulling type of deal.
That's really good. I mean, I think, and I mean this with all sincerity, I think that's why we have successful coaches, and a guy like Sharman is very successful, it's little things like that that inspire your team to maybe get a little bit more out of a drill, and that camaraderie that it builds. You can change, like just changing the word from drill work to real work, I think sends a message to your players that they may focus a little bit more, maybe just a mundane drill that we all go through. And I think when you as a coach can find those little, tidbits in there that allow your players to buy in a little bit more, that's pretty special. So great stuff there. Let's on the same kind of thought process. I know our pictures are kind of going in and out a little bit, but what about offense versus defense in practice? Like how much time do you spend offensively maybe in work/play versus how much time do you spend on defense? Has that changed over the years? Sharm, we'll start with you on that one.
I'm a defensive guy. I can't lie. I love coaching defense. But the funny part, Eric, I try to make practice. That's why I was saying earlier, like even when we're doing stuff that has defensive emphasis, that I have two assistant coaches coaching the guys who are actually being on the offensive side of that particular drill where the defense has to guard it, so that they can kind of like be still be coached on offense, even though we got a defensive emphasis on the drill. And so like even when we get to the end of practice and we do, let's say, a 3 stops or 2 stop, score, stop, score, stop, score, or something like that. It's the same deal. We got coaches coaching on both sides of the spectrum so that, each side is getting better or getting coached. And even like we do 5-on-0, 5-on-5, which I just love that. Like that, I'm letting that take the place of what we do with 3 stops at the end of practice because it's more real. Guys are going down the court, coming back. But again, trying to incorporate both sides of it is probably one thing that I really try to stress, especially with the assistant coaches, because I don't want to be fooled to think that my defense is that great if the guys are just going through the motions on offense. And I don't want to be fooled to think that my offense is that bad because the defense is just, stopping them at like iron sharpening iron type of deal. And so I just try to make it all, work together throughout practice. But I am more of a defense. I spend more time with defensive emphasis, probably because I feel like we can generate our offense from our defense. And when we do have to play offense, it's been predicated on us having to go against our tough defense. So it makes our offense a little bit better.
Mike, how about you?
Again, very similar. Is if we're going to put in something new, like I'll go to one of the assistant coaches, usually Coach Vini on my staff, and I'll tell him what we're about to do. And I'll tell him, like, he's not allowed to tell the players to play, but I'll say, hey, go make a defense that you believe is going to stop us because we need to know if this is going to work. And so we'll do that, especially special situation type of things. Like if we know, like, we're going to go over what we're going to do going into that game, out of bounds underneath or sideline out of bounds. But we start every season really putting an emphasis on our team defense, shell drill, whatever pressures we're going to have during the season. We really try to put an emphasis on that stuff. And then as the season goes along, it becomes just reinforcing those things. And then again, as I've mentioned before, the day before, 2 days before a game, we can go into specific personnel for who we're about to play. And this is how we're going to guard, this great shooter that comes off all of these pin downs, all of this floppy action. This is how we're going to play him. Or, hey, we're going to play Paul VI, and they run a pick and roll on every single set that they have. This is what our pick and roll coverage is going to be specific to this team or this player. So, we do a lot of stuff defensively, but, I think, I've evolved over the years, not many sets. We have a lot of sets, I take that back. But in terms of the way we play, we have a lot of actions, and we just drill those actions as much as we possibly can. So,
Tim, do you have something?
Yeah, I was wondering, at the risk of us talking about this for 4 hours, but I'd heard Coach Van Gundy talk about competition in practice, which you guys alluded to, and he was a high school coach before he got in the NBA. So he said he wished he'd done things differently in high school. I know you guys had a USA coach's Zoom call with him. So I was curious if he addressed that specifically with you guys. And then probably the more larger point is, how do you balance individual work or like even, I think like we do one-on-one closeouts, right? We do some 2-on-2 stuff. We do 3-on-3. And I think the way hearing him talk, he was getting more towards like almost all game situation type stuff as far as how you use your practice time. So I don't know if you guys had thoughts on that and how you try to, how much of your practice is geared towards what actually happens in a game versus you might be trying to develop a certain skill or a certain set in a smaller group.
I guess I'll start on that one and just kind of, if you guys want to jump in, but going back to Van Gundy, he did mention something about 5-on-5 and probably playing a lot more 5-on-5 in practice. And to be honest with you, I think I've evolved 2 ways as a coach and my mentality's changed a little bit in both ways. The first one, kind of the questions that I asked you guys is drills versus play. We do drill a lot, but I would say now in my career and what we do, we probably play more in practice than we ever have. And where I will, if we go through a structured practice, if we do 20 minutes of drills, we might play for 5 minutes here or there, 10 minutes here or there, just to kind of keep that action going. And I think it also helps with the conditioning if you allow your guys to get up and down the floor and play as much as they possibly can. So we play a little bit more than we have in years past. Tim knows this. We do a segment. We do like a 4-minute segment throughout practice. We put 2 teams together and they play for 4 minutes and coaches aren't allowed to stop it. They're not allowed to stop play. And it just teaches them to play as hard as they can for 4 straight minutes. And we'll do that multiple times throughout the course of practice. So we might play for 4 minutes, then do a drill and come back and play for a drill, and then even have a longer segment of playing towards the end of the practice. The other thing I think we do more often is we spend a lot more time on our offense than our defense, because I've always been a big believer, as much as you stress defense is all about attitude. It has a big part about, dealing with attitude. And if you can kind of keep your guys in short bunches, having a great attitudes towards defense and being tough and do offense, I think requires a lot of skill. So I think you need to put a little bit more time in practice to shooting the basketball, to handling the basketball, to doing offensive drills, to build that, in the camaraderie of movement without the ball and all that stuff. So definitely gone from a guy who spent a lot more time on defensive drills to offensive drills now. And we probably play a lot more in practice than we have in the past. And I think that's a little bit along what Coach Van Gundy had said. I don't know if Mike, are you still on? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Your picture's gone. Just Sharm, you want to jump in on that then? There you are.
Yeah.
Am I back?
Yep.
Yeah. But like similar, Eric. I mean, we play a little bit. I try to do it in spurts. I don't try not to get too long-winded in playing, because sometimes they can get sloppy when you do that. And so one thing that we do that our kids really enjoy, because when we did our postseason evals, you always ask, what's your favorite drill? What's your favorite, thing that you do? Because that gives you some input on what they like doing and how you can kind of use that to build on. But we do what we call the day before a game, when we're getting ready to play a game. We do some running, but we do this one every time, no matter whether we're playing, the first game or the championship game, whatever. We do what we call the first 4. And we kind of want to mock the first 4 minutes of a game. And so we'll put our sets, we'll call out what we want to do. And they're playing a live game for the first 4 minutes. So we can kind of get an idea how we want to start the game, if we're pressing, if we're doing this, if we're doing that. And the guys really, really get into it, because they're treating it like it's the first 4 minutes of that. And we let the clock run unless we stop it when we're explaining something, like if it's something we need to make an emphasis on or anything like that. We kind of let the clock run so it won't be a long, 4 minutes. It'll just be pretty much, and we try to get subs in, but it's really for that first 5 guys that you're playing, start the game with, and you're playing them against that second 5 group. And, you're just trying to, if they're running the stuff that the team, they'll be running scout items or what have you, and we're running our stuff. And it just gives us a real feel. And so, again, like to Jeff Van Gundy's point, just practicing things, trying to put things that are relevant in, first. And so they love that first 4, though. We do it every day before a game.
That's awesome. How do you guys feel about when you go 5-man units of keeping your starting 5 together for a majority of your periods as versus mixing them up so they're maybe a little bit more competitive? I know you guys maybe have 12 D1 players, so maybe it's not quite as relevant, but
Well, I mean, to be honest with you, it depends on my team. Like this past year, I had a team that we didn't always start the same lineup, so we mixed it up a little bit because of that. So we wouldn't always have the guys, but I think what is more traditional for us is we do have a first team, a second team. A blue team is always our first team, and our white team or gray team is always our second team. And I mean, I like it like that. It's still very competitive. Our first team does not dominate our second team, but I want the guys to be used to playing with the guys they're going to be on the floor with, especially the first few guys. And again, another thing that we've taken from Coach Wooden over the years is we will have a 6 or 7-man blue team, so that like sometimes my top 6 or 7 guys are all on the same team, and then my next 6 or 7 guys on the next team, because again, that first sub and second sub off the bench are going to play the majority of minutes with your starters, not with the second team. So we kind of do things like that. But to be honest with you, I mean, we had a stretch of the season this year where our second team was kicking our first team's butt, and it was great. It was absolutely great. And lo and behold, I don't know if Donovan Miller's ever going to look at this podcast, but this will be the second time I bring him up. It was always when Donovan Miller was on the second team. His leadership and energy was just it was incredible. So.
Kind of similar to Mike. We early in the year, I mix it up. I like to see certain matchups. I'll mix it up. I'll mix it up all the way up until maybe a week before we tip it off, because of that reason of just trying to get the competitive juices going, and so that guys understand, how we have to be from a competitive standpoint. And sometimes I will take my best player and I'll put him, what I call put him in the hole, and have him, playing with maybe the 10th, 11th, and 12th guy, or the 8th, 9th, and 10th guy, and see if he can will them, see how great he really is, and see if he can will them to win or will them to compete. Because if he does that, he's made those guys more confident and better for our team. And so now when we start getting to first group versus second group, it's a lot more competitive. And then also what I do is I do this plan. They don't know I do it plan, and I hope they don't watch this, but I'll it might be a juncture in the season where things are kind of like at a lull, and I say, look, today nobody has no spot. Whoever you want to start a spot, you go out there and earn it, and you're going to earn it today. And normally the first 5, usually they step it up and they go back and earn their spots. But you might have one every once in a while that might, trigger into that lineup, and then you start them that next game. But just things like that, just, I'm with Mike. You want that group playing as much as possible, and you do want those first 6 or 7 together. And I think that's a great way to look at it, and great idea of how you approach that.
And Flan, just piggybacking off you, Coach Wooten used to have this thing he called intensity. And it was a punishment. But, when the team was not performing up to standards, you weren't doing all the things you needed to do, especially the little stuff, he would start every practice with intensity. And intensity was 20 minutes long. There were no fouls. There was no out of bounds. But if something got called and you didn't run it correctly, you stopped, you ran, and then you picked up the game exactly where you left off. And he would never explain the rules to you. He would just say, hey, we're going to play. And, you get a guy dribble out of bounds, you get a guy stop and look at the coach like you're not going to blow the whistle, and the guy keeps going, or you get hacked like crazy, and nobody says anything. It took the guys a little while to kind of understand what the heck was going on. But then, when there are no rules, you get to see, first of all, who's going to compete, number one, but then who's going to just go crazy too. Like, I mean, I can't tackle you. Like, that's not basketball. So, I mean, Coach Wooten was the ultimate psychologist. Like, he would mess with your mind so much to get you to believe you could do anything. And so the quote-unquote softest guy on your team in that setting, it made him tougher. Like the bully on your team, it made him have to have a governor on, what he was willing to do. It was amazing. So kind of similar to your first 4 minutes of just playing. So
that's great. I think my kids think that I don't never call a foul in practice as it is.
I was about to say that's I think we got intensity the whole.
They kick the heck out of you. I think it is a good point though, because we're maybe a little bit different because we're not in a league, so we just basically 22 regular season games against a lot of great competition. But we try to focus on making sure that we're really good by the end of the season. So I'm bigger on mixing up our rotations a little bit, mixing up our lineups, especially in practice, because I think what you find and what I've always found is that one or two guys that no matter what team he's on, they may not be the most talented player, but they make that team so much better because of their toughness, because of their intensity. And then that kind of, proves to his teammates why this guy plays. Even if he's not the best player, their team's always winning or that team's always competitive. And to Mike's point about the intensity stuff, you find who the tough guys are in certain drills. And to also, to your point, Mike, I think we are psychologists more than we are coaches, 70% of the time than we are, actually coaching the game. So one other question I do want to get into Sharm's video clips if we got them, but we did have a Twitter question from Randall Ward. And you guys kind of answered a little bit in some of your answers, but he asked, how much time do you spend a week on other teams and their films and the plays that other teams run? And you may want to preface it a little bit about your schedule, because our schedule is typically like Friday, Saturday, and we have the week. And we'll work in a night game here or there, or a weeknight game as the season goes on, because that's how the tournaments run. So ours is maybe a little bit different. So Mike and Sharm, why don't we start with you? Like, how much time do you actually put in prepping for your opponents?
Well, the coaches put a ton of prep into it. Like, we spend a lot of time film. Like I said, we divvy up our scouts, and even though I might give a scout to assistant or whatever, it might be their scout. I'm still watching a ton of film, and I'm asking them. We're texting back and forth about what about this kid? What about this particular play? How do you want to try to stop it? Things of that nature. But we play generally Tuesdays and Fridays and some Saturdays. So you don't really have a ton of like prep time as far as, scouts. So you got to be real direct in what you want to cover. And sometimes less is more, and sometimes, more can be less, So it's just kind of like you figure out from that particular team you're playing. Because, let's say if we're playing a team on Tuesday, that's maybe not the best team, but we got a huge game on Friday. That means we're going to probably spend less time on that team and probably start aiming our focus on the team we're going to see Friday. Not saying we're underestimating that team, but we know where we stand at with that team. We know where we're going to be at with them, and we're going to put in the details to make a play for that team. But again, because that quick turnaround, our prep time is short. And so to get a big game and have Wednesday and Thursday to prep for is huge for us, because that gives us 2 days. We can cover their, how they play one day, and then we can cover personnel the next day. We can kind of mix it up and how we go about trying to prepare for them.
And I know, I think I have to in order for me to feel comfortable. So I watch an insane amount of film. And I say insane because that's what everybody tells me. During the season, I don't sleep much. If we just play the game, I'm watching it 3-4 times before I get to school the next day. Then I'll watch it a couple of times during the school day, during free periods. And I do that because I want to be able to communicate with my team, my point guard especially, my team about what happened, what I saw. Hey, tell me what you were thinking here, things like that. In terms of watching film with the team, though, I think it's really important to do, but, you know, you're talking about kids who have schoolwork and things like that. We want to weight lift. We want to do all these other things to help them. We want them to be able to get up extra shots and things like that. And they're not, you know, there's just not enough time in the day to do it as much as I think we would all like to. So, you know, we have built in our program, our varsity team, we get out of school every day at 2:55. We don't start practice until 4:30 every day. That means that on a couple of days we can lift weights before practice. On a couple of days they can go get academic support from our academic resource center. A couple of days we can watch film beforehand. A couple of days, I mean, it just, we built that time in to be able to get everything so that if we start practice at 4:30, we're out of there at 6. We're not doing things after practice that keeps us there until 7 or 8 o'clock at night, and they can get home and do all the things they need to do to be normal kids. But I think watching film, and for us, it's not very long. We might watch a quarter or a half of one of our games, or we might have our video guy clip stuff of an opponent we're about to watch, or hey, this is the way we covered the ball screen the first time we played them. We're going to adjust like from that and show film. But it's never a set number. It's never a structured thing. It's on an as needed basis. But, you know, for players these days that are such visual learners, I think film is an excellent tool for helping. I find it to be extremely beneficial for point guards in particular for their development. So.
Pretty interesting too, the uniqueness. I'm probably a little bit on the other end of the spectrum from you guys as far as watching film and showing it. My assistant coaches, such as Tim and some other guys that we have, they do most of the film watching and scouting and writing it out and sending me that stuff. That's what I've learned to do very well, is use them for scouting reports and for things like that. Now, trust me, I will watch the other team, but I don't obsess over it. I just kind of go through their personnel a little bit and go over their style of play. I have always been a big believer, and still am to this day, that you know, we do so much in practice that we're pretty much prepared for what most teams do, right? So whatever screens they're running, ball screens, they play fast, they play slow. We emulate that as much as possible throughout practice, throughout the course of the season. Now, again, come tournament time, it's a little different. You know, we'll spend a lot more time on film of just breaking down each player, or, you know, running through their sets. But to your point, Mike, I really believe that whether it's their attention span is not the greatest, but also using technology the best we can, we would run about 15 or 20 clips of a personnel or of what they do, and that's it. And we'd be pretty quick about it. In a scout, or we have walkthroughs before every game, as I'm sure you guys do. We will walk through their main sets. We will walk through their out of bounds plays, and we'll talk about their personnel. And then with a little bit of film that we showed before. But if Randall's asking the exact question for this, you know, for me, if he's talking about time in a week, you know, I would say if we play Friday, Saturday, we probably spend a total of maybe 45 minutes total for two teams for the entire week going over their stuff. And you guys would probably agree you spend a little bit more than that on your opponents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
I'll say around the same.
It's all good, right? It's kind of what fits you and what your focus is. I know my assistant coaches have really tried to pound into me to do more at certain times, and I don't question that. It's just not. I have a hard time sitting down and just watching film, where I know Mike Jones can sit down and watch, you know, hundreds of hours of film. I know that, and that's just who you are.
Well, I think also one of the things too, though, you know, again, you talk about the psychology of it. Like, I hate that I think about it like this, but I don't ever want my team to think like, hey, we watched film when we were going to play this team, but we didn't watch film when we were going to play this team. That must mean something. Like, you know, kids, like they feed off of everything. So I try to be as planned out and thoughtful in everything we do. If we're going to watch film when we're playing the team that we're competing with for the conference championship, like I want to watch film when we play against the team that's in last place too. Like I just think you have to do that just for their psyche, or you're going to go lay an egg one night and you're going to wonder why, and it's going to be because your team didn't think that it was as important to prepare. So.
And that's an awesome point, because I do that like almost the exact opposite, where I make sure I don't spend, even when we go back into playoffs, like I don't spend too much time on a team, but we are showing something, and they do know it's more important. And to our point before about psychology, I think our job as coaches, no matter what we do, is how we sell it, right? No matter what we do. So if I don't show a lot of film, there's a lot of good reasons for that. And this is what we'll tell our guys, that, hey, what I always say is I'm worried about you guys remembering our own plays, remembering what we do. And I always tell them, like, listen, guys, we're prepared for anything. So if I tell you that they're going to run this play or this back screen, you're going to know what it is. And if it's something we haven't seen is when we're going to show it to you. So I think it's great just to get different perspectives from coaches. With that, favorite drills and going over some drills.
Hold on, just one thing on that, because I think
Go ahead.
I have a rare point to make. But I think to Coach Jones's point, or even to us that we watch film, it's not necessarily for the kids or to show the kids. And especially I feel this way when we get to the playoffs, which are our most important games, is that I know us and I know our opponent so well that I can, on the fly, think of an adjustment beforehand almost. So, an easy example I know has come up a few times in our playoff runs the last few years is there's teams we've played that you might not know by their personnel or whatever, that I think we needed to sort of make play hurried, play faster than they normally do. And so we have certain defenses and we have certain things we can do to get to that. And we weren't maybe out with that with the kids, but we knew that as a coaching staff, right? So then when it got to a certain point in the game where, okay, we're going to switch into this defense or we're going to change tempo this way, it was already locked and loaded in our brains, and it was a matter of trigger. And this is where Coach Flannery's so great, because he's got a great feel and intuition of when to make those sort of adjustments on the fly. And I think, frankly, he likes doing that too. So for me, part of the preparation as a coach isn't necessarily what you put on your kids. It's what you're ready to do.
Oh, yeah.
Heat a battle because of how quickly you have to make those decisions.
Basketball is chess. It's not checkers. Like, we talk a lot of times about, hey, we have this defense we want to run. We won't run it until the second half so that they can't talk about it at halftime. We want to run an offense, a motion offense in the playoffs. So we'll do it for 2 minutes to 5 minutes a day in the month leading up to our first playoff game, so that your team has drilled it, but you haven't done it in any game, so that your opponents have been able to scout it. Like basketball is definitely a chess game. Again, I hate to keep saying this, but I'll say it again. One of the things that I got from Coach Wooten, like he would make a season plan before every season, and he would write down every single thing that we would need during that season. What to do against a junk defense, what to do against a team that held the ball, what to do in pretty much any situation you can think of. And then at some point in time, before our conference play started, we would have done something in our practices to prepare for that, so that at any point in time during the season, we could always draw on an experience or draw on a drill or draw on some type of preparation that we utilize to get ready for whatever that was that other coach thought that he was going to be able to throw us off with. And again, that's definitely something that I've always taken with me from coach.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All right, we're going long here again, but that's great. Sharm, can you share? Let's go over just a couple of drills. You got them on your
this
computer.
won't take long, guys.
Yeah,
It's
perfect.
Just
Perfect way to finish this up.
Yeah, I think it would be good for coaches, kind of like get to figure out what they need to work on in practice and things of that nature that we do with USA Basketball. Let me see. All right, I'll start it.
Man, this is like one of your coaching clinics. This is great.
Watch out, man. Watch out, man. All right, just real quick, just a couple of things about practice. I always tell guys to have a method to their practice madness. In other words, be organized, have a plan, know what you want to focus on. Try to do the things that occur most in the game that we talked about, what Van Gundy shared with us, that Coach Bennett shared. Competitive setting. Try to do as many live segments as possible where, it's actually guys, even if it's one-on-one, winners and losers, talked about that. And then we talked about winning thoughts, mind candies, just to kind of get their minds going when practice starts. Then I would go right into some of the defensive drills that we enjoy doing. One-on-one posting, one-on-one versus one-on-one in the perimeter, one-on-one in the post. It gives us a chance to kind of work on our post play and then our perimeter play one-on-one, but it's competitive. And so generally you'll see what happens. We'll put all the post guys in the post, put the guards and wings out on the perimeter. So we'll have a, basically like a 2 versus 2 type of deal, but it's really 1 versus 1. And you'll see what happens. They'll throw the ball inside to the post player, and they'll have 4 seconds to try to score. Got this from Showwater. We did this back in 2015. And then the ball will go out to the perimeter, and the perimeter player play one-on-one from there. And again, just, guys competing against each other. And then we'll have the next group up. And just kind of, you might do it on one side, and then you can go to the other side to do it. And so what we generally did was when we got to the other side, we might, flip it around. We'll put the guards in the post and let them play. Every guard wants to be a big and every big wants to be a guard. So we'll put the bigs on the outside, and then we'll, let them play from there. But again, the guards get to play post up and try to play in that area and just competing, So that was one of my favorite drills we did. We do with USA Basketball. And then the next one that I like that Mike did with us this year, he's really a 5-star closeout drill, but, I got better results doing it with 4 guys. And so we would start with the ball in the corner with a coach. Got 4 coaches on the outside, as you can see, and you got all the players up underneath the basket. But what'll happen is, slapping the ball, they'll come out and they'll guard the ball. And you might want to emphasize things like, no middle, force some baseline with that guy. And then he'll go back and tap the next guy. And then he'll come out and gap. And that guy will go close out on the ball. And it'll just continue to go. But one of the things we stress with our defense at USA Basketball is our X and low guys. And this is a great way to kind of get you into that and talking about how you play, on ball and off ball and where you should be at positioning-wise. And so, again, the guy come out, and this is just with the ball in the corner. And you can see guy in help, and you got a guy, an X and a low guy. And then they'll just tap each other out until they all get to that low spot. When they get to the low spot, they'll end up coming out. But it gives every guy an idea of what we need to do defensively. And again, Mike did this with us in June, our training camp in June. I thought it was a great drill. I thought it was a great way to get practice started defensively, get us to our spots. And then, you can go from there and you can do it you can put the ball on the wing and just try to let them do it, where they start off in the gap and then they'll go cover the ball and just putting the ball in different areas on the court. The last one that I really enjoyed was our 4-on-4 shell versus motion offense. So again, we try to, emphasize X and low, but what we did was we put in the offense, a little simple motion offense where, they'll pass the ball side, they'll cut through, guys on the other side will fill, and then just kind of get that movement going. So what we do is we'll do that for like maybe 30 seconds, and then after 30 seconds of them going through that offense and us, communicating and talking about where it is we're supposed to be positioned, we'll go live, and they'll play it live from there to make it competitive. But this just give you an idea. Again, we're just trying to make sure guys are in the right spot, X and low. They're talking, but the offense is actually moving around, making them have to play. And then, after 30 seconds, we'll time it for 30 seconds. Then they'll just go live, and then we'll play it from there. And they can, again, just trying to stress the things that we want to get across or get done in practice. And I got to pay homage to our mentor, Coach Showalter. This was back in June, because a lot of this stuff, he's given us the foundation for. But, working up under him and learning from him has been great for all 3 of us. So that's just a little snapshot. And if anybody wants that, I can shoot you that Tim, and you can send it out if need be so they can watch it in its entirety.
That's awesome stuff, Sean. I mean, these are the rings that Showalter. I made Mrs. Flan run up.
Them, yeah.
I made Mrs. Flan run up and get my rings to just give Mike Jones a little bit. But Mike, I want just to get us conversing on. How about, I got this one from the Jordan Classic. I like that one. So that could be like.
In honor of Last Dance, we're gonna let Last Dance have the rings.
Getting
like
into
that, that looks a little too involved.
Oh, it's easy. That's just a lot of diamonds. It's a lot of diamonds.
AKA expensive.
Not that heavy though. I don't know. Hey, final thoughts on Last Dance. What'd you take out of the last couple here?
This is like just a genius job done by everybody involved. To see Michael Jordan's passion for defending the way he led was truly like just one of the, I don't know if I'll ever forget that. To see him, come to tears pretty much, trying to defend all the people that, would call him a jerk, would call him an ass. But it just goes to show, and I've seen so many things on Twitter. Like one of my favorite competitors, I won't name his name, he had a last-second shot for Villanova, played at a rival school in my league, but he put something on Twitter and it's just like, are we just going to act like, all the things that Michael Jordan did to his teammates would even be okay and acceptable today? And my response to that is, like, just like everything else, times change. Like there's some things that are allowed and some things that are not allowed. And just like, you used to tear your ACL and people said your career was over. Now you tear your ACL and you're back on the court in 7 months, almost like you got a bionic leg. Like times have changed. And what he was able to do back then to motivate his teammates, yes, you couldn't get away with a lot of that stuff now, but he did what he had to do in the era he played and dominated in, and I don't think anybody can really question it. Like, I mean, people used to drink beers at halftime and smoke cigars, like, in the locker room. Like, are you kidding me? Like, nobody's going back and trying to say that they, shouldn't have been allowed to do that. That was just what was allowed.
You guys don't do that anymore?
We want to sometimes.
Yeah. What about you, Sharm? What'd you take?
Man, I two things, man. That soundtrack is crazy. I love the soundtrack.
It's awesome.
It takes me back every time they play a song. Soundtrack's been great. And then the other thing, like I think these last two episodes were the best ones so far. All of them been great, but I thought these last two kind of hit it where I would want my players to see those two more than any of the other ones that's shown thus far. But the one thing that he said in one of them, he said he was talking about to Phil Jackson about practice and how, these guys got to get ready. I can't take it easy on them and, what have you. And I think he said, if you don't understand what it's like to be in the trenches, you're not going to be ready for the war. And that just goes to how I like to think about practice. If I'm not putting them in position, with competitive things we do and competitive things we preparing for this next team we're playing, then I'm not getting them ready for the war. And so I thought that was great. But it's been awesome.
So many good things. The last opinion I want, though, is this. Scottie Pippen takes himself out of the game for the game-winning shot in the playoffs. You two wonderful coaches who have so much success in today's day and age. I mean, it's different. We could all agree it's different at the professional level, right? I mean, it's just different. Those guys are getting paid. They're getting paid more than the coach. They're superstars. They're all of this, that. How would you handle a situation like that if it was one of your own players, and or has your opinion of Scottie changed a little bit?
Well, first of all, I remember that like it happened yesterday. I remember watching that game, and I remember my thoughts because it was immediate. The announcers during the game announced like, oh my gosh, Scottie Pippen's not in the game. And then after the game, it was Scottie Pippen refused to go into the game. So we knew immediately what had happened. And, I mean, to be honest with you, I've never really gotten over that about him. I think that was incredibly selfish. That doesn't take away from the player he was, but just his personality and, you know, his whole hang up over Kukoc. Like he allowed that to affect his team. And it was great that Kukoc hit the shot. It was great that everything worked. And again, you know, he apologizes and all of that other stuff, but that was just a bad look for Scotty.
Well, what's amazing is he said if he had to do it all over again, he thinks he would do the same thing. That was what hit me hard. Like, what?
Well, again, keep also in mind, he did that without Michael Jordan on the team.
Yeah.
And I think had MJ been on the team, obviously the play probably would have been rough for MJ. But let's just say it wasn't. I don't think there's any way in hell Scottie Pippen does that, because he knew he would have had to answer to Michael Jordan.
So if a DeMatha kid did that, what would your response be?
Now let's talking, so people probably couldn't see that, but Mike's eyes got about as big as his whole screen.
Well, I'm just saying, like, if a kid has a kid ever refused to go into a game?
Not for DeMatha.
Okay,
no.
Just making sure.
I'll leave the answer at that.
It's never happened to me either, but it happened, I think, at a Hoop Summit game once.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't coaching though, but I know the story. I think we all know the story. So it has.
I think the biggest thing is this. You know, like you said, pros and high school kids totally different. Like, you know, a high school kid does that. You use it as a teaching moment. Hopefully, we've all coached in a manner or selected a team in a manner that you would not select their personality that would do something like that. But I mean, hey, it is what it is.
Sharm, what do you got on that?
I agree with Mike. I think the high school pro thing is very relevant in this particular situation. But if it was to happen, me and that player got to talk about, you know, his future on the team. I mean, I'm being honest with you. That's not what we're about. I've never had that situation happen, thank God. Don't want to be put in that predicament. Back to the episode, or, you know, that part of the documentary, I thought the best part of that, because I remember that game just like Mike. I can remember Scottie Pippen waving his hands off, and I knew he's not going back in. He waved them off. But what Bill Cartwright did is something that was he stood strong in that locker room and called Scottie out. And that's something I think our kids got to understand. It's okay to get called out like that by your teammates if you did something that was detrimental to the team. And I think that was the best part for me, knowing that he did that. Because, you know, some kids, they'll be too afraid to say or won't say, or maybe they'll say it in close quarters and won't say it, you know, in front of everybody. But I think that's what I would want a young player to walk away from that and seeing that part of it too, you know, and not just look at what happened and how bad it was, but, you know, the part that, you know, kind of like rectified it in the locker room.
That's true leadership, right? And leadership the other way, negative leadership can bring a team down. We always talk about that in another like cancer in a locker room or something. If it's not addressed, and if it's addressed by a teammate, even at the high school level, is way more powerful than if it's addressed by a coach. And to your point, Sharm, that's an awesome point to bring up, because that for us as coaches and people who've been in the game is probably more powerful than what Scottie actually did himself. Tim, you got any final thoughts? I mean, we've ignored you for most of this podcast.
Well, it's been actually I've been multitasking, so this has worked out actually. I appreciate it. I'm sad there's only 2 episodes left. I don't know what the hell I'm going to do after Sunday's over.
You're going to watch Basketball County.
Basketball County, baby.
I'm going to watch that on Friday, and then I got the other stuff
DVR
on Sunday.
You know, every Sunday at 9 o'clock, just watch it again.
And I'm hearing pessimism about the NBA returning this year, so you know, I think that's probably less than a 50-50 shot of happening. So we're in a sports we're in a tough sports spot. There's only so many 90s NBA games I can go back and rewatch. And I'm resorting to watching our JV film from this past year. I haven't got a haircut in 3 months. It's bad, man. There's nothing good happening right now. But
exactly. I feel you.
On the Kukoc thing, that was a hell of a shot he made too, by the way. On that.
It was a hell of a shot. That was crazy.
And Phil Jackson was like, yeah, when he walked off the court, yeah. That's why I wanted him to take the shot.
Not that Phil needs a reason for his nuts to hang, right? But and
the fact that Kukoc had hit 4 or 5 game winners during that same season.
Somebody made a point in the documentary, but if you're Tony, I mean, you grew up in Serbia, in the way he did, and those guys are pounding on you in the Olympics, and you go into that team, like, Kukoc is a tough dude, man. Like,
absolutely,
that's not an easy situation for him to come into as a
absolutely
rookie, and have all that stuff put on, and then deal with it when Jordan came back and play on 3 championship teams. So there's a lot of little hidden stories. It's mostly an infomercial for Jordan, and we all love that. I mean, I was never a huge Jordan guy, but I'm loving him through this. The interviews are great. How they're sharing the story is great. I think I teared up when they were talking about his dad. I teared up at the end of the episode when he was tearing up. Maybe it's just because I've been stuck in my house for 7 weeks and I'm just emotional about everything. But it's fun.
Who's better, LeBron or MJ?
Oh, we don't have another 3 hours. You know what? I'll say. And I don't love these things because the time machine doesn't work. But yeah, no one dominated. Like when Jordan was there, Jordan didn't lose, right? Like they all had the process of you got to get through the Pistons and the Lakers or whoever. And once Jordan did that, once he was on top, nobody ever knocked him off the mountaintop. And LeBron can't say that. Bird can't say that. Magic can't say that. And I think there's a commitment to winning that this documentary has showed out to the 82 game process that, especially here in Cleveland, LeBron was about the playoff process, but he wasn't about the 82 game process. And that manifested itself in different ways. And like I said, we don't have another hour to talk about it, but I think Jordan dominated in a way that no one else in the history of the game, with the exception of maybe Bill Russell, dominated. And I think that's just it's hard to argue for anybody else because of that.
Yeah. Cool.
And Coach Jones, where did you get? We need to get those white hoodies. I think next year from Nike. I think we're all Nike team here. That looks good, man.
That's a couple years ago.
That's a clean look.
Yeah.
Well, fellas, once again, appreciate you joining us. We'll probably have a hard time having one next week because Jones will be out signing autographs.
Yeah.
He'll probably forget who we are, but good luck with that on Friday, Mike.
Hey, I'll definitely have sunglasses on the next time you guys talk to me.
We'll have to
drinking some with my pinky up.
So one question I want to ask about the Jordan thing, nobody brings up, or at least I haven't seen it, why his bloodshot eyes and the drink and the cigar next to him during the majority of this interview. Like his eyes are more bloodshot than, I'm just
if you recall, MJ always said that he wanted to have a gut. He figured he played and he earned the right. When he got older, he wanted to have a gut. And obviously smoking cigars and, whatever other vice he has, that's him. And he has no issue letting the world know that that's him.
Man, I love it. I got to go to my wife and tell her why I have a gut now. Same reason. I've earned it. Once again, guys, thanks for joining us. We'll see you hopefully next week. Tim, thanks for putting it together.
Always a pleasure, fellas. Enjoyed it.
We'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, right.
All right, fellas. Great job as always.